Special Operations Training Detachment, SOT-D West, Burrow Team. Coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm Captain Weston Rich, an observer coach trainer for the Green Berets at the National Training Center. This is the second and final part of our conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Shoemaker and Major Schwant. In part one, we covered what the Mission Command Training Program is and how it trains special operations, battalions, and group staffs. In this episode, we discuss how special operations battalions and above integrate with the conventional force and observations from the combat training centers. So, I know you're at the National Training Center observing a rotation right now. I know you've come out to JRTC last year to observe a rotation. Are those the only in the dirt CTCs that you have been a part of in your current position?
Yeah, definitely for the CTCs. We did go out to an Indo-PACOM. I think there was some live. It was a SIGINT con rollout for the Indo-PACOM. Really, most of my teams, our first real chance to see kind of how a JTF operates in Indo-PACOM. There was some stuff kind of going on live. We were very much focused on how the SIGINT tied in at the JTF level. But yeah, we've really only looked at. My guys came out last year, I guess, for the division, the first run of the division.
Yep.
Really kind of a challenge to understand that. That was an AOB level. And that match was kind of challenging.
That was a really big AOB. They had 80 people in their AOB, and then they had their ODAs and cats and stuff out there too. So
right, and that commander again, he was given a lot of freedom. The way I understand it, and he came out here and did, I think, some really good things. I think he really set the conditions for this SOTF rotation, and let us all know, hey, if the Army's going to invest divisions in the dirt, then I think this is appropriate. Whether we think a division and a SOTF matches up in the real world, having an O5 come out here and kind of go through this problem, it's a great challenge for them, and really puts them a lot of pressure on them.
Yeah. So I know right now the SOTF is here on ground in the box with the division headquarters, but I think at the JRTC rotation last spring, they were separated. They were dislocated from. There wasn't a division or anything because that was just 7th Group's rotation. But the SOTF was outside.
It was setting the conditions for the JFAO.
Yes.
And then, what we saw on that one was the division was coordinating with the siege of SOTF to set conditions for that JFAO.
Yeah, that was more of what you mentioned before, crisis turns to conflict, and an SF group gets called in immediately, and then the conventional force is building combat power and being ready to do that entry operation, which I did think that was a really unique and interesting scenario versus the National Training Center typically is there's been an invasion and things have kind of hit a stagnant point, and then the conventional force and the soft force kind of get here at the same time. Maybe the soft elements a little bit early, but not the way that we depicted it at JRTC. So what were the main takeaways for you guys from that JRTC rotation?
Yeah, I think I'll jump back to kind of the question you asked me earlier about kind of comparing what I saw in the early 5th Group experience to now. Back in the glory days of GWAT, ODAs, I mean, we ruled our kingdom. Right, I went and coordinated with a brigade commander, a battalion commander from the conventional side to let them know, here's the things I'm doing. But I really wasn't asking permission. Right, we were developing targets, we were developing partners, and we were going after those targets.
Yeah.
What we realized, and I don't know if you remember, there was a little bit of a task force chaos. Is what someone had called themselves last year at JRTC was, hey, I'm just here to rain chaos in the enemy's kind of area.
Yeah,
was kind of what one of the leaders said, and man, that was a great training for us, because it was no, you're here to understand what that JFAO commander needs us to do to set conditions.
Yeah,
right. And so we got so used to, and we still see it with some of the groups, we're hey, a siege of SOTF exists to just enable a detachment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, that's not true. In this environment, right? We see it right now. We got 4 teams out there, limited awareness about what's going on in this environment. They have limited comms. They're in comms windows. They're all in hide sites.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know where this conflict is in time and phasing, right? And so a siege SOTF, a SOTF, whatever sits on top of them has to do the thinking for them.
Yeah.
It has to point them to do things at a specific time, a specific place with a specific purpose. And I think that's the real value that we're getting out of these CTC rotations.
Yeah.
Is you're not Captain Chaos.
You need that synchronization piece.
Right. Because again, this division right now, they're in a tough fight right now. They're not here to win this war. They're here to defend so that other forces can come in. Well, do our ODAs know that? And that's very different than thinking, hey, we're about to liberate this place. And so you can kind of go Captain Chaos. No, this thing is going to be a protracted fight, and we need ODAs in the deep so that we can continue to understand the enemy in the deep area, and then conduct targeting. And so again, siege SOTF, in this case, SOTF, has to do the thinking and point them at, hey, here's the point of impact for you to do the targeting, or develop a partner force, a surrogate to go conduct an act, because we're going to do it at the right time and place to maximize the capabilities of the joint force. So again, very different than what I grew up in CT. Our guys are going to have to really think through and be patient to understand that, hey, we are here to enable the joint maneuver force, and that's a pretty challenging mission to have.
Yeah, we typically have conversations in RTUs after the fact, or rotational training units after the fact, be like, oh, well, this isn't counterinsurgency or counterterrorism, and we're not the main effort here. We are here to enable that joint force. And I feel like a lot of the training units that come through understand that leaving here. They might not have understood it very well coming here. And yeah, sometimes that is realizing when you need to hunker down and when you need to ramp up, because, I mean, trying to enable that joint force, you have to know when that moment in time and space is to actually to go hot or non-lethal, whatever it is. If it's something that's cyber or space or influence or IO, you got to do it at the right time and place. Otherwise, you just painted a target on your back and you're out there alone and unafraid, and there's not much that can come help you if there's anything.
Well, and it's a whole different risk calculation, and I think that's the thing our senior leaders are going to struggle with, right? Is they grew up in an environment where it was like, hey, 20-page con op, I mitigated the risks as best I can. We're going to go hit this local cell. Everything will be fine. In this environment, the political calculus, I think, that will lift some of the risk restrictions on us is going to be the loss of conventional guys at the front line, right? And so I think, rightly so, leaders have said, hey, SOF getting authorities early to go do things is not possible. And we tend to agree until you lose a tank company, until you lose an infantry company where, now the front pages of the newspaper are saying, hey, we're in this conflict and, 100 boys and girls died.
Yeah.
And suddenly an ODA taking some risks, a PSYOP team launching a message, that was like held up at the 4-star level suddenly becomes, hey, we might need to take that risk. And so I think it's good for us to paint that picture in the minds of our teams that, hey, this is a conflict where there's going to be people dying, and we're not sending you on a one-way mission, but we are going to take more risk with you because of the dynamic of tanks on tanks, killing each other.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty important to kind of paint that.
Yeah, we've had conversations about authorities. Some in a conversation I had with 2 of our senior mentor role players, it was like, well, our authority is going to be high, low, like where are they at? And he's like, basically it's going to ebb and flow throughout the conflict. And yeah, there'll probably be times where that information operation is, okay, we're going to reduce that authority so we can try to have that narrative, because we've seen, especially when we have PSYOP and CA, SF on the red side, they can get a narrative out so much faster because of that lack of authorities or lack of bureaucracy to prevent them from doing it. But Frank, do you have anything you want to add to what you've seen out here? I know you didn't go to JRTC, but
yeah, I think that this is a commonality actually, and I'm not trying to shift gears for us entirely, but between both the warfighter and the CTCs, we constantly hear that, hey, this is a very like limited scope, right? Like we only have like our left and right limits, we have our range fans, but in all honesty and in all earnest, soft activities are going to take place more than just on the battle space that's defined in front of us. That periphery is going to be very key for us to shape that operational environment regionally and put pressures on the adversary in certain cases where our conventional forces partners, they would absolutely benefit from the downstream effects. And sometimes that's in the information space. Sometimes it's more physical. Sometimes it's, something found economically from like a civil affairs team finding something out and being able to leverage economics in an adjacent country in order to put another point of pressure on the adversary. So going back to like the CTCs and the warfighters and just like the complexity that we provide in that operational environment, I would say that how to word it. There's still a lot of work left to do to develop that out. And this goes into, as Colonel Shoemaker was saying, we got to understand that developing out that joint force entry, the activities that we're doing well left of any sort of like joint RSOI into theater, that's where we're going to find a lot of traction, especially with SIOP and civil affairs. I mean, it's a little bit more linear and clear for our special forces counterparts, but for SIOP and civil affairs who generally are not going to operate in the deep until potentially that risk factor is re-engaged. Our pressure points are going to be in different places.
I mean, you might not physically be in the deep, but you can have influence.
Absolutely, and that's why one of my caveats in there was like, yeah, the information space is ubiquitous; it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So, and that is some place that we can leverage. And if soft civil affairs is out there to leverage the human domain in order to shape the operational environment for the supported commander, then that doesn't just limit itself to, again, that battlefield geometry that's on a map that's in a warfighter or at a CTC.
Yeah. And then we talk about, and we mentioned it tonight, that SOF, especially SF, is going to be out in the division deep or extended deep, but SOF holistically is looking further battlefield geometry wise and hopefully time horizon wise beyond what the conventional unit is focused on. How is that coached from your guys' perspective?
Yeah, it's right. It's like when you were a platoon leader, right? Like the training in front of you, the conditions in front of you is kind of what you go towards.
Yes, and
we're seeing that. It's an entire siege is sort of being committed to a mission that we're kind of like, I don't think you're committing, 3 SOTFs into that, right? The challenge we have is, we've said it, we don't have a robust plan cell to really give that periphery kind of environment that, hey, let's be honest, if we're going to a major war in Europe or a major war in Indo-PACOM with a key adversaries, it's every theater is probably going to have some sort of reaction. And so we kind of get to that point of like, well, I'm a siege SOTF and I have 3 SOTFs. I'm sending all of them. And it's like, yeah, but once you actually be using them, in other spaces. So it's tough. I mean, I don't hold it against those commanders because they're like, hey, I want to play with all my toys, and in this environment you gave me, I'm gonna aim them.
And I mean, maybe they're in an adjacent country and they're doing some kind of deterrence or influence thing there. So yeah, that's something that we struggle with here at the National Training Center is, replicating that holistic picture. We've gotten better through my time here, getting a deeper scenario, especially when it comes to the human domain and getting CA and PSYOP more of a realistic feels. So they're not immediately on day one jumping in and like, oh, I hit the bottom of the pool, like there's more to it. And I've heard it from people that have come here in the past and people that have come here more recently, like, wow, you guys have developed that out way better.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I was going to make, is that back when I was young, this is my first assignment, right? Like in 2010 to 2012, we did all the GWAT and all the coin rotations. I'm massively impressed with your regional relationship that you've developed in vicinity of the NTC, with partnerships extending even into Nevada and down the hill, past the El Cajon Pass, into the main communities down there for, security, electricity, sewage, water, a lot of different other, like what I would see in a SWET MSO assessment, or different governance capacities, different partners that we can leverage into this rotation to really enrich that training environment. The SOF guys were doing it, right? Like, we arrived here a couple of weeks ago, and while the rest of the division was conducting their RSOI, SOF was already active. They were out there in the communities. They were doing, special reconnaissance, civil engagement. They were developing that operational environment to support the perceived future kinetic activities of the conventional forces counterpart. So I think that is absolutely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. Our goal when we have a training audience in MCTP, CG SOTF, our goal is to make their staff processes better. And so no doubt that's our focus. But we're also teaching the Corps and division staffs what SOF can deliver. And so, to Frank's point, a lot of times early on in the warfighter, SOF reporting on like intel and stuff is massive. Like literally when they turn the war sim on, because the way the war sim is, the icon, whatever's near it, it actually collects. Okay. Right. And we build out like indigenous networks, in the sim. And so, you'll have a G2 at Corps say like, okay, how do you know all this about what's going on in Lithuania? And we have to explain to them like, we've literally been there for 20 years. Yeah. Well, our networks are going to be massive, CA built, SF built, whatever they are. I
mean, we have people that have personal relationships because they've been there on a joint combined training exercise.
They're going to tell us things, right? And so the next question is, well, are they validated? It's like, well, listen, like some of them are, literally NATO partners, right? Yeah. So NATO partner is a very different thing than, some country that we just kind of met recently. And some of it's just going to be local citizens that don't like the enemy. Yeah. And that massive data infill, we probably overplay it in the war sim, but that massive data, it's information until you guys take a look at it, analyze it, and turn it into intel. Yeah. But it's a lot of information that every scenario essentially starts with a no-fly zone. So it takes away all the ISR assets. Yeah. And really it's your SOF folks on the ground through our networks, whether CA, PSYOP, or SF developed. That's who's giving us the kind of reporting about what's going on. And I think that's real. Again, maybe we give a little too much, but painting the picture of our irregular warfare campaigning matters. Yeah. We're trying to prevent conflict with it, but in conflict, that's what's going to give us that robust network of sensors.
No, yeah, I definitely like that approach. I tried as a observer coach trainer here to get detachments to, hey, yes, it's large scale combat, but all of those tenets of unconventional warfare, regular warfare, they apply. Like, think about it through that lens. I know other members of the Burrow team like do that too. And really that's like huge, because if you just, I don't know anything about large scale conflict or combat, you're going to not have a frame of reference. You're not going to have a model to go off of. But if you hopefully give that training audience and model that they're familiar with, okay, we can get to an 80-90% solution. We can start going somewhere with that. I do want to ask about this specific rotation that we're in right now. What's the communication? What are you seeing between the SOTF and the units of action on the ground? Like, is there a communication issue? Are the unit of action understanding what the SOTF's how they see the battlefield, or is it garbled? Is it a good connectivity between
So the first thing is tremendous relationship, right? Like, have not seen this sort of close relationship between a division and SOF, where this division just trusts this SOTF that, hey, they're gonna deliver. All right, so that's point one. Technical communications problems, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We got firewalls that are literally preventing them from communicating, sharing information back and forth. So I think again, it's something we see in every rotation. We always hear, well, magically, if we go to war, like that won't exist. I'm very skeptical, but that relationship helps to get through some of that. Co-location is both good in that, right? They can go walk over and talk to their counterparts, but co-location also is a challenge because that's a division staff, man. That's huge. A SOTF doesn't have that capacity, and so they overmatch you, and then you also get kind of pulled into the division almost as like a subordinate and a staff member, as opposed to, like I said earlier, commander's going to have to make some decisions, and there's going to need to be some staff process to inform that decision.
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenge. But we actually just saw this division in a warfighter last year, and a warfighter is so different than fighting in the dirt because it's comfortable. They were living in nice spaces. They're working, their 12-hour shifts or whatever. These guys are literally out in the fight. And it's remarkable to see.
And took indirect today or yesterday.
I mean, they've had drones, they've had indirect fire, they had enemy helicopters, they've had it all. They also had, hey, generator trailers broke. Like, that doesn't happen at a warfighter, but that happens in real life. And so I think it's really, really good for both the SOTF and the division to just the friction of war, the friction of just. Sometimes, everything's out against you, including karma and whatever else you believe in. And again, I think that's been remarkable. We've delivered effects. I mean, we've absolutely provided a large chunk of the targeting in the deep that they've conducted. Pretty effective at removing a lot of important things off the battlefield. But just like we see in a warfighter, there's a lot of gray, ill-defined challenges that hasn't led to some changes. And I think ultimately they've taken a lot of losses because of it. And that's good to learn here. So hopefully in real life, we don't have to go through that same experience.
Yeah. My understanding is the AOB that's out here is more acting like a logistics node and less of a mission command node, since there's a SOTF out here. Is that an accurate assessment?
100%. I think we're heading in that direction as a community. To be honest, and I'm a fifth group guy, so pretty proud of our history. But the siege of SOTF really controlled teams going into Afghanistan in 2001. So they cut out. Just imagine, they cut out SOTFs and they cut out AOBs. Now they were running certain aspects, and SOTFs came in fairly quick, but it was a realization that they needed streamlined decision making. ODAs talking straight to Colonel Mulholland at the time to get that guidance, to paint the picture to him about what they're experiencing, so that we didn't have a big bureaucracy trying to get involved. Now AOBs were forward at the ISB, and coordinating logistics and things into the teams. I think that's pretty realistic. And this idea in GWAT, every level of C2 got a cut on the CONOP.
Yeah.
The fact that we had CONOPs was bad, but then every headquarters was looking at it, really never providing a lot of feedback on it, because ultimately the 05 commander approved it. So I think we're going to get back there. I think that's a good place for us to be. ODBs, you know the deal. Like, they're built to look like a team.
Yeah.
But they're not really able to operate like a team typically. So I think this is the right place. We do think ODAs are going to be tasked with resupply missions, right? So you're going to have ODAs that are in the fight, calling for fires and doing all the cool stuff. You're going to have ODAs that are going to get selected because you're going to be crossing some pretty dangerous country just to get logistics into those teams that are in their hides. So again, missions are not going to be the traditional ones that you guys learned about in GWAT. It's going to go back to pre-GWAT and understand that these things take a different construct than what we were executing.
Yeah, I mean, crossing the FLOT is doing an F-pole, R-pole. That's a risky risky thing.
Yeah, it's risky because both the enemy might hurt you and the friendly.
Yeah.
As you're driving through minefields that our friendlies put in place, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty risky.
Does the current AOB have any liaison with the brigade, or are those two headquarters separate and it's just at the SOTF and the division level?
Nope, they don't. And part of that is probably the construct of the exercise a little bit.
Mhm.
But again, I think our days of liaison at the brigade is probably over. I think in this space where the division is just moving so fast, both forward and back. And I don't know if you guys are tracking, but we got a new communications construct happening in the regular Army, where SIPR is not going to be down at the brigade level, and so
Really,
so that's
they
that's
took
coming.
it out of the brigade.
Yeah, they're communicating with some pretty interesting
Okay.
approaches, but the whole idea again is if the division is the fighting unit,
Yeah,
don't get that brigade so tied up on their SIPR PowerPoints.
yeah.
Let
yeah.
them be mobile and really focused on fighting on the ground. So I think you're not going to see a lot of liaison at the brigade level. It's going to really be retained at division and higher.
All right. How are they doing on the CA side of the house at the SOTF level?
Everything is great. That's a great question. So again, it's difficult as CTCs, right? Difficult in warfighters, but I will say that because of the legwork that NTC, and perhaps that's more attributable to a Burrow team, has done leading up to this rotation, there's partnerships that exist well outside of just closing distance with and destroying Black Horse. It's more dynamic. It's more complex than just that. I would say that the civil affairs unit that's currently out here, shout out to Delta 91st, they're doing great. I think that they are communicating. We'll start with their relationship with UCK-POC. I think that they're communicating extremely well with their reservist counterparts. They've got representation at the division's rear command post, and although the automations aren't linking up as well as they should, the analog products are quickly understood, quickly replicated, and are moving their way quickly through that command post. There's great understanding between the G39, the G9, and the rest of the folks who would be interested in the human domain in that area, and that's largely because of the efforts of the soft civil affairs folks who are operating there. Now, move forward a little bit closer to the FLOT. They're dynamic. They're engaged. The civil affairs teams have built relationships well enough to be able to leverage aspects of the human domain and deny the enemy resources in the deep. I think that that's amazing. I think that that's exactly what soft civil affairs should be doing in LSCO, specifically all the way out there in the battle space geometry. Yeah, either the division deep or the core deep or even further than that. Our ability to affect anything within a SWET MSO assessment with the human networks that we've developed around those different factors really affords us the ability to shape on behalf of the supported command. And I think that the interplay between civil affairs, PSYOP, and special forces is phenomenal at that SOTF level. I really get a feel that the commander of SOTF 3-1 has empowered these two other commanders, that is the PSYOPs company as well as the civil affairs company, to inform him, empower him to make a decision and attack violently based off of whatever sort of guidance he gives. It's a great dynamic.
Awesome. Are they looking forward to the transition of governance piece? I know that, at least my understanding prior to this rotation, it bleeds into the next one, and at the end of the next one, there's going to be like an actual transition, or at least that's what the CA planner was telling me.
Yeah.
That at the end of this whole shebang, they're going to try and do a legitimate transition planning exercise. So I that's, they're going to make them try to plan for transition and then go execute in some manner with like host nation government role players and the like.
I'm not exactly informed on that, but I will say that if such a situation has taken place, great. We need to kind of break ourselves of that GWAT, that hangover of, hey, any sort of stability operations are going to be on us because the Department of Defense has that lead federal agency moniker, right? We're there for the long term. We're doing this nation building sort of weird thing that we're not designed to do. And civil affairs is going to, really, rebuild some of these areas and empower folks and do a long drawn out PMECA scope crosswalk. No, there's a host nation government. It existed. It's a sovereign country well before, crisis turned to armed conflict. We're gonna do our best to ensure that we can streamline that transition to stability by empowering our host nation counterparts. USACAPOC has a really big job in that.
Oh yeah,
they've got to understand that when it comes to developing out those networks, that's kind of a soft, aligned problem set. When it comes to empowering those networks to reestablish governance operations and provide essential services for their citizens, that's absolutely USACAPOC. They're going to have to step up a little bit in that regards, in my opinion. But I see it happening, even in exercises like this. They're very much so apprised of the problem set, and they understand that a lot's going to lean on them in order to solve that. They're interested. They're not a disinterested party by any stretch of the imagination. And more exercises like this will absolutely develop their capacity to perform.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this rotation's coming to an end soon. I know you guys are going to be out of Fort Irwin here in a couple days. What's going in the AR? What's the biggest sustain? What's the biggest improve? If you want to share.
So I'll kick it off. I think a couple of things that we're talking about. Decision making is a huge challenge, right? The doctrinal answer to problem solving is MDMP.
Okay, yeah,
and up front, to be honest, Soft hates doing MDMP. Right? We I think we joked about it the other day. The last time most of these SF guys did MDMP was probably in the Q course, right? At least to a standard that was checked. And so. But decision making takes information, it takes analysis, it takes a process. And so, of course, we coach the doctrine, and MDMP is that basis. But really, what the walkway is, you got to have a process.
Yeah,
you got to have an operations process because planning is already difficult for us, pre-conflict, right? As we're trying to really hash out some details. It doesn't get easier when tanks are moving on each other, when you got ODAs in harm's way. Like, it gets much harder.
Yeah.
Right. And so looking at a SODIF staff, and I said it the other day, and one of the staff officers had a frowny face. I said, battalion staff is the worst staff because it's your first time of being on staff, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not because we hate you. It's because you've literally never been on a staff before. You're learning. To make it to the big day, the big leagues one day, to go to CG SODIF and higher. And so you're learning a lot. And so I think decision making, in stride as you're getting IDF'd, as you're trying to figure out how to maximize your targeting. I think that's one that we want to talk through. And this SODIF has a challenge because they have 3 nodes. And so decision making from 3 nodes is already a challenge, and then the transitions. So when one headquarters has the con, is in control, and then hands it over to another headquarters, there's got to be a process for that, right? Because we're not talking, hey, I'm stepping out for 5 minutes. You've got another entity that's going to move in a denied, in a combat zone.
Mm-hmm.
You can't assume that they're only going to be off the net for a couple hours. You got to assume that they're never coming back.
Yeah.
And so I think some more rigor into that handover process for transitions between headquarters that are taking control, I think is one that I think we all could learn a lot from. I don't have all the right answers on that one, and so I think that's one that we'll really
that's
push.
Kind of unique to this rotation too. That we got back-to-back rotations, so we have headquarters switching out and doing that RIPTOA for the rotational scenario continues, at least for the SOF units that are out here.
So. Yeah. Frank, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest points that I'll probably hit on is at time. You really got to respect the time that it takes to do anything out here, and it's remarkably different than the time that it takes in a warfighter. Now, warfighters have been kicked around as the meeting industrial complex. As I said earlier, you can really burn out your primary staff officers by having just meeting after meeting after meeting, and that comes from either your higher command, maybe you've got a touch point with your low comms, and then you've got your organic meetings internal to the headquarters itself. Folks will get burnt out, and out here at a CTC rotation, there's that added dynamic of, well, I don't have to click something on a war sim to affect a unit in the battle space. I got to physically go out there and do it. I still have to do my PCCs, my PCIs. I still got to, make sure that I didn't miss log pack and the fuel is topped off. And oh, by the way, we missed it. So now, we're not going to be able to move or do this for an extended period of time. We got to wait or, dig into the cache in order to get us back up to where we should be. Time, right? There's time that goes into planning and executing operations out here in the CTCs. And we really have to respect not only our subordinates' time, but our own time. I once upon a time heard from a very smart man that sleep is a weapon. And if you are hitting that tracer burnout and you're not any good to your element anymore, well, I mean, like, that sums it up, right? Like you're just done for the fight until you can get back on a cycle, get rested up, and you can get your mind back into the game. I would caution them that running so thin and so lean in this nodal approach that Colonel Shoemaker just mentioned really does put the stress on the time it takes to do things. And I hope that that's a lesson taken for years to come. So.
Yeah, no, good insights. On the subject of time, we're going to wrap this up because we've been at it for quite a while, but I do really appreciate you gentlemen coming over and sitting down and talking with me and sharing your insights. We talked about what the mission command training program is, how it works, how you guys integrate with Siege of SOTFs and division corps through warfighters, and then you come out here and you support the combat training centers and observe, coach, and mentor senior leaders at the SOTF and above level when they're out here executing in the dirt. So thank you for everything you shared and all that you do. I'll let you guys end it with anything you'd like to say.
Yeah, again, just thank you for having us over here and giving us the ability to, kind of speak about the relationship between Mission Command Training Program and where the Army's developing in LSCO writ large. That's pretty much all I got. Thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, I would just close out by saying, I think we should all appreciate where we came from. And so, we kind of talk about the differences of SOF and LSCO compared to GWAT. It doesn't mean that GWAT lessons don't go, that we should still use those lessons. I think we should be reading our history all the way back, right? We need to be looking at the World War II history, Jedburghs. We need to talk about what happened in the Philippines. We need to talk about what happened in Vietnam, and really learn from that and understand that we're not going to, history doesn't repeat itself, I don't think, but it rhymes, right? Yeah. And so it's aspects of our history are going to come back and be really vital tools for us to use in the future. And then the last thing is no Army doctrine. The Army is going to maneuver. We need to know how they're going to maneuver. So let's take our learned history and our experience in our training and be able to apply that to an understanding of the maneuver. And we are going to be a very, very effective force if we ever have to do this in the future. But thanks for taking the time.
Now, I'll plug in one more thing about history, World War II history specifically, the Sino-American Cooperation. If you've ever heard of that, that's really interesting. And if you haven't heard of it, go read about it. But thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where RSOF prepares for conflict. Like, subscribe, and share on your listening platform. Actions will determine the outcome.